The massive council chamber buzzed with terrified voices as emergency alarms blared throughout the galactic station. Red warning lights flashed across holographic displays showing star maps, where entire solar systems had simply vanished overnight. The ancient enemy everyone thought was just a legend had returned. Commander Hune sat calmly in the human section. Watching alien species, he had never seen panic like this before. The tall, crystal-like Vextai were making sharp ringing sounds. That hurt his ears. Their leaders kept changing colors from blue to bright red as they argued about running away. Next to them, the cloud-like Morden floated around nervously, their gas bodies getting bigger and smaller as they spoke in worried whispers. "The outer colonies are gone," announced the head counselor, a massive creature with 6 arms and 3 eyes. "Every ship we send to investigate just disappears. The Devourers are real, and they're moving toward the core worlds." Huen had read about these Devourers in old galactic records. They were supposed to be monsters from space that ate everything in their path: planets, stars, even entire civilizations. Most aliens thought they were just scary stories told to children, but now dozens of worlds had gone silent in just 3 days. The Vextai delegate's crystal body turned bright orange with fear. "We must evacuate immediately. Move all populations to the inner systems. Build defensive barriers around our home worlds." "Running won't work," said a Morden representative, his cloudy form shaking. "If they consumed the Zeta colonies this quickly, nowhere is safe. These creatures adapt to everything we throw at them." Other species around the chamber started shouting suggestions. Some wanted to hide in deep space. Others talked about surrendering and hoping the Devourers would show mercy. A few suggested trying to communicate with these ancient beings. Commander Heian stood up slowly. The entire chamber went quiet as hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at the human delegation. Most had forgotten the humans were even there. "We volunteer our fleet to assist in defensive operations," Hune said in a steady voice. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then several aliens started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that comes from hearing something so ridiculous it's almost funny. The head counselor's 3 eyes blinked in confusion. "Commander Heian, with respect, your species has only been in space for about 200 years. You have maybe 50 ships total. These Devourers destroyed a 1,000-ship fleet without taking any damage." A Vexti delegate's crystal form flickered with amusement. "These primitive Deathworlders think they can fight something that has terrified the galaxy for millions of years. How charming." But Hyon didn't look upset or embarrassed. He just nodded politely and sat back down, already making plans. Captain Yuna pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window, watching something that would give her nightmares for years. 3 days after the Galactic Council, meeting the largest alien fleet in recorded history, had assembled near Tau Ceti to face the She was there as an observer on a Vextai command ship, since humans weren't allowed to participate in the actual battle. The alien fleet was impressive. Over 2,000 ships from 12 different species, all equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The Vextai brought their crystal energy cannons that could slice through asteroids. The Morden had phase disruptors that could tear apart molecules. Even the peaceful Kelleran had contributed their gravity bombs. "This will be over quickly," announced Commander Zexaval, the Vextai leader. His crystal body glowed with confidence. "No force in the universe can stand against our combined might." Yuna wasn't so sure. She had studied the reports from the outer colonies before they went silent. Something about this enemy felt different, more dangerous than anything the galaxy had faced before. Then the Devourers appeared at first. They looked like a dark cloud moving between the stars. But as they got closer, Yuna realized she was looking at thousands of ships unlike anything she had ever seen. They weren't built, they looked grown, like massive insects or sea creatures from Earth's deep oceans. Their hulls pulsed like living tissue, covered in what looked like veins carrying glowing fluid. The alien fleet opened fire immediately. Thousands of energy beams, plasma bolts, and explosive missiles streaked across space toward the approaching swarm. The weapons hit their targets perfectly, and for a moment, Yuna thought the battle might actually be quick. Then she watched in horror as the damaged Devourer ships began healing themselves. Holes in their hulls closed up like wounds on living skin. Broken sections regrew in seconds. The glowing veins pumped faster, and the ships actually seemed to get stronger after being hit. "Impossible," whispered Commander Zaxavel, his crystal form flickering between colors. "Our weapons have no effect." But it got worse. The Devourer ships didn't just repair themselves, they adapted. When the Vextai fired their crystal beams, again, the enemy hulls absorbed the energy and reflected it back. The Morden S-phase disruptors suddenly couldn't lock onto their targets. Every weapon the aliens used worked once, then never again. The Devourers moved through the alien fleet, like sharks through a school of fish. Their own weapons were horrifying, tentacle-like cables that wrapped around ships and drained them completely, leaving behind empty metal husks floating in space. 3 hours after the massacre at Tau Ceti, Admiral Jin received an urgent message on his ship's emergency channel. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but he could make out desperate alien voices begging for help. Against direct orders from the Galactic Council, Jin commanded his small human fleet to change course toward the distress signals, sir. "The Council specifically told us to return to Earth," warned his second-in-command, Captain Dong. "They don't want us involved in this fight." Jin stared at the tactical display showing scattered alien ships limping away from the battle zone. "Those are people out there, Captain. We don't abandon people." The human fleet consisted of only 12 ships, nothing compared to the massive alien armadas. But these ships were different, built on Earth by humans who understood that space was trying to kill them every second. They were tough, practical, and designed to keep working even when everything went wrong. When they reached the fleeing alien survivors, Jin was shocked by what he found. Proud Vextai warriors, who had seemed invincible just days ago, were now floating helplessly in damaged ships, their crystal bodies dim with trauma. Morden captains who usually spoke with authority were barely keeping their gaseous forms together. "This is Admiral Jin of the human fleet," he announced over the communication channel. "We're here to help." The response was immediate panic. "Humans, you need to run. Get away from here before they find you. The Devourers will destroy everything." But Jin ignored their warnings and ordered his ships to begin rescue operations. Medic Hannah suited up and boarded a damaged Vextai cruiser where dozens of crew members were injured. The aliens watched in amazement as she calmly treated the wounded, showing no fear despite the horrific stories they were telling her. "Your ship's hull is cracked in 17 places," reported Engineer Kyung after inspecting a Morden vessel. "Your life support is failing, and your engines are barely working. How are you even still alive?" "We don't know," replied the Morden captain, his cloudy form shaking with terror. "We watched them consume everything. Ships, planets, entire star. Systems just ... gone. And they're still coming." Lieutenant Minho was helping repair a communication array when a Vextai officer approached him. The alien's crystal body was flickering with confused colors as he stared at the calm human. "How are you not terrified?" the Vextai gasped. "We just witnessed the end of civilization, and you're fixing equipment like nothing happened?" Minho paused in his work and looked up at the alien. He thought about the history lessons every human child learned, the ice ages that nearly wiped out humanity, the supervolcano eruptions, the asteroid impacts, and the countless predators that hunted their ancestors every single day. "We've seen worse on our own world," he said simply, then went back to work. 2 days after rescuing the alien survivors, Admiral Jin's combined fleet was moving through the Kepler system when their long-range sensors picked up something that made every alien Onboard freeze with terror. A small group of devourer ships was feeding on the remains of a destroyed space station, their biomechanical hulls pulsing as they consumed the metal and energy. "We need to retreat immediately," urged Commander Veltar, the senior Vextai officer they had rescued. His crystal form was already turning the pale blue color that meant fear. "Those are scout ships, but even one of them destroyed half our battle fleet." The Morden captain they had saved was practically vibrating with panic. "Admiral, you don't understand. When they detect us, they'll call the entire swarm. We'll all be consumed." But Admiral Jin was studying the tactical display with the same calm expression he always wore. "How many ships in that scouting group, Lieutenant Bora?" "7 vessels, sir. Each one about the size of our heavy cruisers." The alien officers couldn't believe what they were hearing. The humans were actually considering fighting these nightmarish creatures that had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history. "Sergeant Day, prepare the weapon systems," Jin ordered. "All ships, battle formation Delta." As the human fleet moved into attack position, the devourer ships noticed them. What happened next would haunt the alien witnesses forever. The enemy vessels began making sounds, not through radio, but somehow directly into the minds of everyone nearby. It was like the screaming of 1,000 dying creatures, mixed with the sound of metal being torn apart. The alien crew members immediately collapsed. Vextai officers curled up into tight crystal balls. Morden personnel lost their gaseous form completely, becoming shapeless clouds of terror. Even the brave Kelleran warriors started crying and begging to be taken home. But the humans kept working. "Those sounds are just psychological warfare," Sergeant Day announced calmly over the communication system. "Earth's predators used similar tactics. Ignore the noise and focus on your targets." The devourer ships were designed to inspire fear. Their hulls looked like they were made of living flesh, with what appeared to be blood flowing through transparent tubes. Massive tentacles extended from their sides, and their weapons ports looked like gaping mouths filled with sharp teeth. "Target their neural clusters," they ordered, highlighting specific points on each enemy ship. "Those glowing sections that look like brains, that's where their processing centers are located. Make them hurt." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that hadn't been designed to look impressive or intimidating. They were just built to destroy things efficiently. Kinetic rounds, plasma charges, and fusion missiles streaked toward the devourer scouts. For the first time in millions of years, devourer vessels began exploding. The alien witnesses couldn't process what they were seeing. While they cowered in terror from creatures specifically evolved to be frightening, the humans treated them like any other enemy. After the successful attack on the devourer scouts, word spread quickly through what remained of the galactic fleet. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone had actually hurt the ancient enemy. Ships from dozens of species began arriving at the human fleet's location. Desperate for hope and guidance, Admiral Jin called a meeting aboard his flagship to discuss their next move. The main briefing room was packed with alien officers from species he had never seen before. Some looked like walking trees, others resembled giant insects, and a few appeared to be made of pure light. All of them stared at the humans with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Intelligence reports indicate the main devourer fleet is 3 days away," Jin began, pointing to the star map display. "They're moving toward the core systems where most of our populations live. We can't outrun them, and hiding won't work. So we're going to make our stand here." A tall, insect-like alien clicked his mandibles nervously. "Admiral, with respect, we have maybe 200 ships total. The main devourer fleet has over 10,000 vessels. This is suicide." "Maybe," Jin replied calmly, "but if we can delay them long enough for the civilian populations to evacuate, then dying here means something." The room erupted in shocked whispers. These humans were talking about deliberately fighting a battle they knew they couldn't win. Jin continued explaining his strategy, and with each detail, the alien officers looked more horrified. Captain Bach would lead the fastest ships in a direct assault to draw the enemy's attention, even though everyone knew those ships wouldn't survive the first wave. Engineer Nari was preparing to turn their ammunition storage ships into massive bombs that would detonate if the enemy got too close. The idea is to make ourselves so dangerous that destroying us costs them heavily, explained Commander Wu, checking his personal weapon out of habit. Even if we lose, we want them to remember this fight. This is madness, whispered Commander Veltar, the vexed eye officer. His crystal body was flickering between colors as he tried to process what he was hearing. You're planning to sacrifice yourselves deliberately. Your own species, your own people. This is survival, Wu replied simply. On Earth, when a pack of wolves attacks, sometimes one wolf has to sacrifice itself so the rest can escape. When a wildfire comes, sometimes you have to burn part of the forest to save the rest. The Morden captain's gaseous form was trembling. But your families, your children, don't you want to live to see them again? Lieutenant Kong spoke up from the back of the room. Of course we do. But if we run now, there won't be any families left to go home to. The alien officers were beginning to understand something terrifying about humans. These weren't warriors seeking glory or honor. They were predators who had survived on a world that tried to kill them every day, and they knew exactly what it took to survive when everything seemed hopeless. 3 days later, the main Devourer fleet arrived, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. The enemy ships stretched across space like a living storm cloud, not thousands, but millions of biomechanical vessels of every size. At the center of the swarm was something that made even the humans pause. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, covered in what looked like breathing skin and pulsing with an evil intelligence. My God, whispered Captain Bach as he stared at the tactical display. How do we fight something like that? Admiral Jin's voice remained steady over the communication channel. Same way we always have. One ship at a time. The first wave hit their defensive line like a tsunami. Hundreds of Devourer vessels crashed into the combined fleet, their tentacle weapons reaching out to drain ships of all energy. Within minutes, a quarter of the Allied fleet was gone, leaving behind empty metal husks floating in space. The alien crews immediately began preparing to retreat. This was hopeless. They had done their duty by trying, but now, survival meant running away to fight another day. But something strange happened. As the human ships took damage and their people started dying, they didn't fall back. They fought harder. Pilot Sue's fighter had lost its left wing and was leaking atmosphere. But instead of ejecting, she accelerated directly toward a Devourer cruiser. This is for Earth, she screamed over the radio as her ship exploded against the enemy's hull, taking out their main weapon system. On the flagship, Communications Officer Kai was bleeding from a head wound where debris had hit him, but he kept coordinating attacks between human ships. Strike Team 3, target those neural clusters. Strike Team 7, cover their retreat. Commander Veltar, the vexed high officer, watched in complete bewilderment as the humans around him worked with increasing intensity. Why aren't you retreating? He asked Engineer Nari, who was rerouting power while sparks flew around her. Retreating to where? Nari replied, not looking up from her work. This is our line in the sand. If they get past us, they reach the civilian ships. The more damage the human fleet took, the more creative and desperate their tactics became. When Captain Yol's weapon systems failed, he used his ship's engines to ram a Devourer vessel. When Lieutenant Wan ran out of missiles, he started firing pieces of scrap metal at enemy sensors. The alien witnesses couldn't understand what they were seeing. In their cultures, when a battle was clearly lost, the smart thing was to retreat and regroup. But these humans seemed to get more dangerous as the situation got worse. They're not just fighting, realized the Morden captain, his gaseous form rippling with awe. They are getting stronger. The worse things get, the harder they fight. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourer advance actually slowed down. As the battle raged on, conventional weapons were becoming useless against the Devourer's swarm. Their biomechanical ships adapted to every attack, healing faster than the Allied fleet could damage them. The massive hive mind entity at the center of their formation was slowly moving forward, its presence making reality itself feel wrong and twisted. "All missile launchers are empty," reported Weapons Officer Tay from the bridge of Admiral Jin's flagship. "Energy weapons are overheating. We're running out of ways to hurt them." That's when the humans started thinking like humans. Captain Min was commanding a heavy cruiser that had lost most of its weapons when he noticed something on his sensors. "Engineering, how much fuel do we have left in the main tanks?" "About 60%, sir. Why?" Min studied the tactical display, calculating distances and velocities in his head. "Because I just figured out how to turn this ship into the biggest bullet in the galaxy." What Min did next would be talked about in alien cultures for centuries. He ordered his crew to evacuate 2 other ships, then aimed his cruiser directly at the largest Devourer vessel in the enemy formation. But instead of just ramming it, he waited until the last possible moment and ignited his fuel tanks, turning his ship into a kinetic missile, traveling at nearly light speed. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, while alien crews watched in shock. Physicist Yun was working on something even more insane aboard her research vessel. She had been studying the nearby star for weeks, and she knew it was unstable, the kind of old red giant that was ready to collapse at any moment. "Captain Rue," she called to her ship's commander, "I need you to position us exactly 2.3 million kilometers from the star's corona." "Doctor, that's way too close. The radiation will kill us." "Not if we do this quickly." Yoon's fingers flew over her equipment as she prepared to do something no one in galactic history had ever attempted. "I'm going to destabilize the star's magnetic field and create an artificial gravity wave, using a combination of quantum resonance devices and particle accelerators." Yoon began bombarding specific points on the star's surface. Within hours, the ancient star began to wobble on its axis, its gravity field fluctuating wildly. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate. Ships that had been healing and adapting suddenly found themselves being pulled in different directions by unpredictable gravity waves. Some were crushed against each other, while others were flung out of formation entirely. "They're using stellar engineering as a weapon," gasped the Morton observer, his gaseous form rippling with disbelief. "They're weaponizing a star?" For the first time in eons, the Devourer fleet showed signs of confusion. Their hive mind had faced countless civilizations across millions of years, but none had ever been crazy enough to destabilize an entire solar system, just to win a battle. The massive central entity began to pulse with what could only be described as uncertainty. The massive hive mind entity at the center of the Devourer fleet had been watching the battle with growing confusion. These small, primitive creatures were doing something impossible. They were actually hurting its forces. After consuming countless civilizations across millions of years, this was the first time the ancient intelligence felt something it had almost forgotten: uncertainty. So it decided to deal with the problem directly. The moon-sized creature began moving toward Admiral Jin's flagship, its biomechanical surface pulsing with malevolent energy. As it approached, reality around the human ship started to bend and twist. The hull began creaking under pressure that shouldn't exist, and the lights flickered as unknown forces interfered with their systems. "Admiral, that thing is targeting us specifically," reported Navigator Cho, his voice tight with controlled fear. "All other Devourer ships are pulling back. It wants us alone." Jin stood on the bridge, watching the nightmare approach through the main viewport. "All crew members, prepare for psychic contact. This is going to get ugly." The alien officers on board had no idea what was coming. They had never encountered the hive mind's true weapon, its ability to reach directly into the minds of its enemies and show them their worst fears. But the humans knew, because they had studied the reports from civilizations that had faced the Devourers before. When the psychic attack began, it hit like a sledgehammer to the brain. Suddenly, every human on the ship could see Earth burning. They watched their home planet being consumed by Devourer ships, saw their cities melting and their families screaming. The visions were so real, they could smell the smoke and feel the heat on their faces. This was the hive mind's ultimate weapon, showing people exactly how their world would end. The alien crew members immediately collapsed. Commander Veltar's crystal body shattered into pieces from pure terror. The Morden officers lost their gaseous forms entirely, becoming shapeless clouds of panic floating around the corridors. But the humans kept working. Gunnar Lee was at his weapon station, tears streaming down his face as he watched visions of his daughter being consumed by biomechanical monsters. But his hands never stopped moving, targeting and firing at the approaching entity. "I've seen Earth's history," he muttered between shots. "Asteroid impacts, ice ages, supervolcanoes. This is just Tuesday." Engineer Sion was rerouting power to the shields while watching her hometown being destroyed over and over in her mind. "We've survived worse," she said through gritted teeth. "We always survive worse." The hive mind was experiencing something completely new. Usually, when it showed creatures the destruction of their world, they either went insane or gave up entirely. But these humans were using their terror as fuel, fighting harder as their fear increased. Communications Officer Jang was coordinating with other human ships, even as nightmarish images filled his vision. "All ships, focus fire on the central neural cluster. Don't let it get away." The ancient intelligence realized it had made a terrible mistake by engaging these creatures directly. The hive mind entity was learning something that terrified it more than anything it had encountered in millions of years. These humans weren't breaking under its psychic assault, they were getting stronger. Every horrific vision it showed them only made them fight with more determination. This was impossible. This was wrong. Admiral Jin stood on his damaged bridge, blood running from his nose as the alien intelligence pressed harder into his mind. Around him, his crew worked through visions of Earth's destruction, their hands steady despite tears streaming down their faces. "All ships, this is Admiral Jin," he announced over the fleet communication channel, his voice calm, even as he watched his home planet burn in his mind. "We're going to end this now. Operation Final Stand is a go." What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. Engineer Sol was aboard the ammunition ship Resilience when she received her orders. Her job was to manually override the safety systems on all fusion cores and detonate them at exactly the right moment. She knew this meant she wouldn't survive, but she also knew it would create an explosion powerful enough to damage even the hive mind entity. "Tell my family I kept my promise," she said quietly into her personal recorder. Then she began the countdown. Sequence. Captain Ben commanded the heavy cruiser Defiance, one of the largest ships in the human fleet. His mission was to ram the hive mind directly, using his ship's mass and speed to penetrate the creature's biomechanical defenses at the exact moment. Sol's explosion weakened them. "All crew to escape pods been ordered. This is my ride from here." But his crew refused to leave. "We're staying, Captain," announced his first officer. "If we're going out, we're going out together." The alien observers watching from rescued ships couldn't believe what they were seeing. These humans were coordinating their own deaths with military precision, sacrificing themselves not out of desperation, but as part of a carefully planned strategy. "They're not just dying," whispered the Morden captain, his gaseous form trembling with awe. "They're weaponizing their own deaths." The synchronized attack was beautiful in its terrible simplicity. Sol detonated the fusion cores, just as Captain Bin's ship slammed into the hive mind's central neural cluster. The explosion lit up the entire star system, and for the first time in eons, The ancient intelligence screamed, not through psychic channels, but with actual sound that shook nearby planets. The massive creature began retreating immediately, its biomechanical surface flickering with damage and confusion. The rest of the Devourer fleet followed, abandoning their formation and fleeing into deep space. As the alien survivors watched the enemy disappear, they finally understood what made humans so dangerous. These weren't just warriors or soldiers. They were apex predators from a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and they had learned that sometimes you have to embrace the darkness to protect the light. The galaxy would never underestimate the Deathworlders again.